All right. Welcome to the Bois Sports Talk. Today we got college football championship games and rankings. We have Connor, Cena, and Brandon on the podcast today. We're each going to give our individual assessments for this week's game and our projections for top four right before the college football committee puts out their rankings. We're going to start with the Pac-12 championship game. 13 USC versus Oregon. Oregon won the game. To me, I predicted this to happen. I thought it would be Oregon's offense that won them the game, but it happened to be Oregon's defense that won.
Yeah, I didn't get to watch the game, but I saw that USC tried to make a late push, but predicted Oregon to win.
Yeah, I missed out on that one also, but I saw the overall results, and it caught me by surprise a little bit, to be honest. But I already knew that the USC team was a little overrated, but didn't think they was lose to Oregon like that. No.
Yeah, I caught about the majority of the second half for that game. Slovis was just struggling. He's not really used to these big type of games as opposed to Oregon, who's normally every year is going to be in the Pac-12, so they're used to this kind of game. So I just think Oregon's experience in the championship game kind of helped seal the deal.
The Slovis, I would say, I mean, you can't put a loss on one player, but you can kind of say that he kind of lost it for his team. His first two interceptions led to Oregon's touchdowns, and the last one came within the last few minutes to allow Oregon to run down the clock. He came into this game very hyped, and he didn't live to his reputation. Next game, we got number 4, Ohio State versus 14, Northwestern. Ohio won 22-10. I personally think this game was controlled by Northwestern's defense, and the only reason Ohio State won was because Northwestern's offense couldn't get off the ground. I think if Northwestern's offense played a little differently, I'm not a big fan of the Wildcats offense, but I think if they could have put up points, this was Northwestern's game. Eventually, it's Ohio State. Eventually, they were going to score, and Northwestern's offense didn't do enough to help out their defense.
Yeah, basically what you just said. Northwestern's defense kind of kept them in the game for most of it. They kind of contained Justin Fields for the most part, but they couldn't shut down Ohio State's running back, and that's what really hurt them in the long run.
It's hard to shut down a running back when you're constantly
normally when you have
your offense can't do anything.
You're normally beating the shit out of somebody.
Yeah.
I agree. Northwestern controlled that whole first half of that game, really. Offense and defensively, really. After the halftime, really is where Ohio State really took off on the running game. That their running back Sherman ran 331 yards. He just really took off after that. Defense didn't. I don't think they really adjusted to the run game for them, and they realized how heavily they were relying on that and their running back Sermon, and that's where Ohio State really just won the game. Really, it wasn't by passing at all. It was just through that run game. I mean, 300 yards by one running back. That's ridiculous.
I think their linemen match up better than Northwestern's.
Yeah, Justin, passing-wise for Ohio State, Justin Fields just wasn't there. He looked defeated throughout the whole game, especially in the first half when they couldn't move the ball. He only completed 44% of his passes all game, and he had some terrible interceptions. But all of his problems weren't just him. His receivers were dropping a lot of passes, and I think that's what led to Ohio State just running the ball in the second half.
Yep.
Next game is the Big 12, number 6 Iowa State versus number 10 Oklahoma. Oklahoma won 27-21. This was another game that I called was going to be an upset. I thought Iowa State was a little too highly ranked for my liking. Oklahoma came in and dominated the first half, but in the second half, Iowa State turned it on, allowing only 3 points to Oklahoma's offense. Spencer Rattler looked good, throwing for 272 yards and 1 touchdown while throwing for another one. So I kind of expected Oklahoma to come in and win this game.
Yeah, this was my lock pick of the week, and I chose Iowa State over Oklahoma. I always did think it was overrated, too high ranked up, but I thought they can just come out with a barely win. But man, Oklahoma really just outplayed them the whole game until the very end of the third quarter is when Iowa State their offense decided to try to step it up into gear, and that's when they made that big push on that comeback. And the last minute of the game, they had to drive to try to tie up the game, and they threw an interception, a big interception that lost them the game.
Yeah, I picked Oklahoma to win. I figured since it's the Big 10 or Big 12, I figured there'd be more points scored. But in that conference, it's usually a lot of points or it's hardly any. But it was about as close as I figured, and Oklahoma wins their 6th conference title in a row.
Yeah, I said the only way that Iowa State was going to win is if Reese Hall could run. He wasn't able to run very much. He had a hard game. He only ran for 3.4 yards a carry, but he did score twice. I also didn't think that Iowa State was going to be able to throw the ball. Brock Purdy only threw for less than 60% of his passes with 3 interceptions, each coming when his team was driving down the field too. And then the last one came when you're driving down the field to win the game and you just throw it up for no reason to get intercepted. And I also feel like he just tried to rely on his 2 top receivers, his receiver Hutchinson and his tight end Kohler, which I think Oklahoma was all over for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, that's all really. Those are the only real 2 weapons he has. Tight end, he's a beast, though. 6'6", he's a giant, man. Big target. Yeah, he really relied on him.
All right, next up, we got the ACC. We got number 2 Notre Dame versus number 3 Clemson. Clemson dominated Notre Dame 34-10. When the game first started, it did look like Notre Dame came out to play. During their first 3 drives, they drove down the field and scored a field goal. Then Clemson's first drive, they intercepted Trevor Lawrence. And then their third drive, they also drove down the field. But this time they missed the field goal. And right here, I feel like it was very early on, but this was definitely a turning point after that missed field goal, because after they missed that field goal, it was all Clemson until the last minutes of the game where Notre Dame finally got to score a touchdown.
Yeah, that game was it was pretty one-side dominant, really. Clemson really just dominated that whole game from every aspect. Clemson's linebacker are really good. They definitely they are able to send the pressure when it's called for. They really got a great front 7.
Yeah, not scoring a touchdown until 8 minutes and 8 seconds left in the fourth quarter. That's not going to beat Clemson. But I said last time Clemson was going to come out for revenge, and that's what they did.
Yeah, I think during our first meeting, Notre Dame was able to hold Clemson to 34 yards on 33 carries. I said this was going to change, especially with Trevor Lawrence back, because Notre Dame was going to have to respect the passing game and also his running game, so they weren't just going to be able to stack the box against him. And this time they ran for 219 yards on 27 carries and 2 touchdowns, and that was solely because Trevor Lawrence is back. So Notre Dame didn't have an answer to Clemson's run game, which also opened up their passing game, as you saw Trevor Lawrence hitting his receivers wide open down the field for touchdowns.
Yeah. For Notre Dame, I always think they're overrated. I think they beat a lot of teams in the top 25. I just don't think they're a top 5 team ever. In my opinion, they don't beat a Florida, they don't beat a Oklahoma, they don't beat the Clemson, which they've proven when they got all their starters they win. Even the game they won, it went into overtime without Clemson starting QB. They don't beat Ohio State, they don't beat A, they don't beat Georgia. So for me, I just don't see Notre Dame in the top 10 at all, really. So I really didn't think they even belong to be there.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I feel. But I feel like this Notre Dame team is better than the seasons past.
All right. Next, we have the AAC Championship that we're going to touch on real quick. We had number 9 Cincinnati versus number 23 Tulsa. Cincinnati won 27-24. This game really doesn't matter that much because after the final score, Cincinnati just didn't do enough to make themselves move. So they should have came out here and justified and showed the committee that they made a mistake dropping them the last 2 weeks, but they didn't do that. They struggled to beat a Tulsa team that is really good, but it's not going to do anything for their hopes.
Yeah, they needed to make a statement that game. If they wanted to be there, even in a conversation, they needed to blow them out big, at least 21 points. But they didn't do that. Like you said, they just struggled. So they're definitely out of the playoff talk because of how much they struggle with a Tulsa team.
We have the Sun Belt, 12 Coastal Carolina versus 19 University of Louisiana. This game was canceled, and the conference will recognize both of the schools as co-champions, but Coastal Carolina will be submitted to the playoff committee as their official champion. And because of that, I will take the L on University of Louisiana for my drink lock of the week. And I have my beer right here, so I guess I'll chug now. Be the first person to chug so far. Should have got a can.
Should have put a straw in that thing. Yes, sir.
I got my notes wet now. All right, now we got the SEC Championship game. Number 1 Alabama versus number 7 Florida. This game turned out to be a shootout, but in the first half, it was all Alabama, scoring 35-17. And that's how Florida's been all year. Florida has been a second half team. They kept it close in the first half, and then the second half they'll come out and dominate. But this Alabama's team was too good for Florida to catch up, even though they tried. I also think Florida did have a chance to win this game, but after they scored their last touchdown and they kicked a scrib kick, they should have just kicked it was their second to last touchdown. They should have kicked the ball into the end zone and trusted their defense to stop Alabama's defense, but instead they hit a squib kick to the 35-40 yard line, which gave Alabama a short field, and that pretty much just set you up for failure right there. I think if you trusted your defense, made Alabama start from the 20-25, I think you gave yourself a shot to come back and win or tie.
I get what they were trying to do, but they obviously couldn't trust their defense the whole game. I mean, they gave up 52.
Yeah, you're right. But when your defense struggling, you don't want to give – because with a squib kick, you're not going to get the ball back. You're just trying to stop the other team from returning it. If you would have gave the ball to Alabama at the 20-25, maybe you could eventually have gotten a stop. I mean, it's going to be hard to stop Alabama from scoring when they start out at the 40.
Yeah, man, Bama was definitely dominating in the first half. But like you said, Florida's really a second second half team. But Florida did come out with a good game plan starting off in the game with pushing their DBs back more, so they would stop the Devin Smith with the over top passes, which made Bama change up the game plan on the sideline, which we've come to find out from Mac Jones' interview with Tim Tebow that they had to change up their game scheme of hitting these real short passes and rely a little bit more on their run a little bit, just to get that big shot down the field. With that being said, they had a whole bunch of records broken this game. Najee Harris broke not only the SEC championship touchdowns in the game, which was five touchdowns, 3 passing, 2 rushing. But he also broke the conference touchdown in a career by a running back, and he tied his school's touchdown record in a game. Devontae Smith broke the record for receptions in a single game, and which had 2 touchdowns and 15 receptions, and the all-time receiving yards in the first quarter. So, which was held by Amari Cooper recently. And Mac Jones, with 418 yards and 5 touchdowns, set the SEC championship record for completions in one game, or in the season, which was 43.
Like y'all said earlier, this is just 2 really good teams. So you expected kind of a shootout or a really good defensive game, but I believe Nick Saban said also that it's kind of hard to win, which is defense in the SEC these days. So you kind of expected a shootout. Again, Kyle Pitts was not really into the game to start off with, so they looked to I think his receiver's name is Tony. So Trask found him a couple times. So Bama had to readjust and focus on him as well as Pitts. But I believe Matt Jones and Devontae Smith and possibly Najee Harris this was just a game that they make a bid for their running for the Heisman. And Bama had the better offense and apparently the better defense and won the game.
Yeah, Trask, he had a pretty good game, threw 408 yards. Him and Mac Jones did really good this game, so there's nothing to complain on them. When you look at the stat sheets, Mac Jones does have that one interception with this game, which wasn't his fault. That ball was straight ripped up right out the dude's hand, so I wouldn't put that on him as much as anything. But yeah, I think where Florida really fell short was their running game. I mean, you can't really get a running game, and rely too much on your pass. Not with a team like Bama, with the coaching staff that they have. They're just too smart for that. So I think it was a really close game. It was nice. It's nice to watch.
All right, number 5, Texas A&M versus Tennessee. This game only mattered if a team in the top 4 would lose, and Notre Dame did lose. Did A&M do enough to make it to the playoffs? They won 34-13. They gained over 500 yards, and they only given up 213 yards.
I mean, that game. Sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah, I think A&M just really dominated that game. I mean, I wasn't expecting nothing less. But all that did was help them really be a real contender, and showed the committee that they can whoop up on these lesser teams easily. I don't really think A&M had one loss, and that was against a Bama team. They lost pretty good, but I think by beating Tennessee like they did was a real good step in direction to help the committee decide on a lot of things for them.
All right, we got 2 minutes before the ESPN starts releasing the committee football playoff rankings. So we'll go around asking who y'all think's in, who y'all think's out before they start. We'll start with Connor.
I think it's, for my in teams, I think it's Bama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Texas A&M. I think Notre Dame's the first one out.
Cena?
For my top 4 playoffs, I got Bama at 1, Clemson at 2, Ohio State at 3, and I got Notre Dame at 4. Yeah, you can look at the game and say, yeah, they lost. I think it was about 24 points. Yeah, 24 points. But that was the number 3 team, Clemson, playing number 2, Notre Dame. So yeah, even though they kind of got blown out, you just say, I still think the committee's gonna find a way to keep Notre Dame at number 4.
Yeah. I'm Bama's number 1 for me. Clemson, number 2. Ohio State's number 3. And at that 4th spot, Notre Dame's definitely out for me. But it's kind of like a little toss-up for me between A&M and Florida and Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma put themselves in the running with that last win. And I know Florida just has that loss to Alabama, but man, something about them, they're just so dominating, and they didn't lose by a lot to that Bama team. So I think they're still in that running, but I think it's really coming down to Oklahoma and A&M for me.
I got Alabama number 1, number 2 Clemson, number 3 Ohio State, and for me, number 4 will be Oklahoma. I think if Notre Dame does get dropped out of the top 4, it's because they got blown out, and A&M got blown out by number 1 earlier this year. So if you're gonna fault Notre Dame from getting blown out, you're gonna fault Texas A&M. So I think Oklahoma makes the jump to number 4.
Yeah, it's a rough one between A&M and Oklahoma. You got to really look at who they played. And in reality, A&M only played Bama and Florida, and they got blown out by Bama. And we know the committee doesn't really like many rematches when it comes to these games out of blowouts. So I don't know if they'll probably take that into heavy consideration with the A&M game. But A&M only played Florida and Bama, and Oklahoma played Iowa State, losing the first time, beat them the second time, real good. And then Oklahoma State and Texas they beat.
Brandon's gonna get called out again.
You got called there, Brandon?
Yeah, I think the committee also knows that each time they put the Oklahoma Sooners in, they always get whooped in the first game, and they have never won a semifinal game yet.
I mean, that's Notre Dame too.
Yeah, but Oklahoma's been in more of them.
And it's coming on right now. I'll just watch for now. But I think if Florida would have beat LSU last weekend and they kept it close as they did with Alabama this week, I think Florida would have had a chance of going in. But because of their loss to LSU, I think that kind of puts them on the outside, and I don't think
they have too many losses now.
Yeah, they've never had a 2-loss team go into the playoffs, so I don't think the first multi-loss team is going to have a 3 behind it.
Yeah, it's also a little hard. Because I mean, Notre Dame, I really do think they're overrated. But I mean, they beat number 15, I think at the time was North Carolina, and then they beat Oklahoma early in the year. I mean, mid-season, but beat them in the overtime, without their starting QB. But it showed how much of a difference, like when they get the starting QB, how much of a difference it made for that team, and they showed it. They showed that they can blow this team out easily.
Yeah, I think the committee is definitely going to look at that and see that, it was a close game, their first matchup, but once Clemson came back, got their starters back, Notre Dame couldn't compete with them.
And another thing is, them not scoring a touchdown to the last 8 minutes against Clemson. Well, what do they think is going to happen if they put them at number 4 and they play Bama?
And I would also
go ahead.
I would also think number 5 Texas A&M won't get in because even though they're highly ranked, and they do have a big win against Florida, I think it's going to be hard for them to justify a 1-loss team that didn't go to their conference championship over a 2-loss team who did.
Yeah, that's definitely a big statement. You know, that title right there is huge. You know, I know these teams, the committee takes into consideration like injuries, sickness, and stuff like that. You know, so these teams are the committee is very understanding of like these key players missing. So,
Yeah, the other thing is I think it's still hard to eliminate Texas A&M because they haven't really eliminated themselves.
I mean, they really haven't, but if they're going to take out Notre Dame from the top 4 because of a blowout, you have to do that with Texas A&M also.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if they do take out Notre Dame at number 4, that A&M will be that number 14. Just because look at their resume, they have only lost one game, that was to Bama. I don't think Oklahoma has done anything to really make a case for themselves, but I still have Notre Dame at number 4.
All right, while we wait for them to start putting out the final rankings of the year, let's go around talking about who we think is going to be the Heisman of the year. Connor?
Mr. Mac Jones.
Cena?
So when I looked at the Heisman, I looked at the potential candidates. You got Matt Jones, who has completed 76% of his passes for 3,321 yards, 27 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Devontae Smith, 83 receptions for 1,327 yards and 15 touchdowns. Trevor Lawrence, 2,431 passing yards, 20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. And then I think Najee Harris is also making a name for himself because he has 1,084 rushing yards and 22 touchdowns. But I think the Heisman is going to be coming from the University of Alabama, and I think that winner is going to be Matt Jones.
Brandon?
Yeah, I think it's really between 3 players, really. I think Najee Harris made a statement for himself, but I think it's a little too late for him to hop in the runnings. But I think between Mac Jones, Devontae Smith, and Kyle Trask from Florida. I can't really remember the last time a receiver actually won the Heisman. It's been a while since for as far as I remember. So I'm actually pulling for Devontae Smith to win it. Do I think he'll win? No, I think he's sitting in the 3rd spot right now. But it's definitely I think it's going to be really down to Kyle Trask and Mac Jones.
Yeah, I think the front 3 runners are those 3 people: Kyle Trask, Mac Jones, and Devontae Smith. Some people are still saying Trevor Lawrence. I think what hurt Trevor Lawrence is him being out for 2 games, and Clemson still showing that they can win and compete without him. I mean, they're not as dynamic without him, but they can still compete without him. Kyle Trask does have the better records. He's going to finish the year with over 4,000 yards, 43 passing touchdowns, and 2 rushing touchdowns with only 5 interceptions. Devontae Smith has had a good year. He's 98 receptions for like 19 touchdowns and 1,500 yards. But I think for a receiver to win the Heisman with quarterbacks playing as well, they had to have a very good year. And even though his year has been good, it's not extraordinary for a receiver to do. But I think even though Kyle Trask has the better stats than Mac Jones is still going to finish the year with over 3,700 yards and 30 touchdowns. So, and because of the way his team has played and what they're doing, I think the committee is going to look at that and factor that in and vote in Mac Jones as the next Heisman.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that last part that you said. You know, the team wins and losses. You know, it definitely plays a big factor. It's can you lead your team to a win? You know, and with Florida having 3 losses, you know, I don't know if he'll be able to pull that off, even with his great stats that he has. That's still 3 losses on your record that you can lead your team to win. So, Mac Jones definitely has that over him. You know, I feel like their stats are very similar when they overall. I'm really pulling for Smith though. I would love to see a receiver win it, but like you said, I don't think he had an extraordinary year like the past receivers that have won it. Receiver that has won it, you know.
Yeah, I think the LSU game really hurt Kyle Trask too.
All right. We're still waiting. They're just talking on ESPN, so we'll move on to our next topic. This weekend we had a lot of championship games. What is an event that surprised you? For me, it was UAB beat Marshall. These two teams in championship wasn't very didn't matter really. It just mattered for those two teams. But the way Marshall has been playing, they were a top 15 team at one point this year until they lost 2 weeks ago, and then they dropped out. But for a UAB team to beat a Marshall team that has been playing extremely good this year, I found that surprising. I thought Marshall was definitely going to win their championship game.
I've got to send a congrats out to the San Jose State beating Boise State in the Mountain West title.
Kind of going on what you said, Chad. I kind of keep up a little bit on the Conference USA because I'm a Southern Miss fan and they're in that conference. So I kind of keep up with them. Yeah, I was kind of surprised that UAB beat Marshall because Marshall was ranked and they had a good bit of momentum going. But UAB is also one of those teams that they are sneaky good and you never know which team you're going to get from them. So I was kind of surprised, but yeah, I wasn't surprised at that much. But I was pretty impressed with UAB pulling off the win against Marshall.
I was surprised by Northwestern, honestly. I know they didn't win, but how they played that game, I was really surprised by them. And another team, I know their game was canceled, but, you know, Carolina, you know, they really, Coastal Carolina, they had a great year. You know, that was, I think, the highest ranked Sun Belt team they ever had. They're one of the best teams that they ever had, for sure. And I would love to give them a round of applause to them for doing so good in their season.
Yeah, another thing about UAB I forgot about, they seem like they rebounded pretty good because they shut down their football program for 2 years after 2014. So it's pretty impressive.
Go Tigers. I'm surprised they're still just talking and not releasing these rankings.
I told you they talk and just make you wait.
Yeah.
They might just be doing the same thing, talking until something actually comes out. And a team that did surprise me is Indiana. They did pretty good this year. I never had them on my radar to be doing that good.
I mean, the Big Ten isn't that big.
Right. But for them, I mean, they were never really a good team at all, really, you know? So for them to actually do what they did is actually a little surprising.